I was cast as the lead in the biggest fantasy series of the year, and my co-star was the most insufferable man in Hollywood. My name is Lyra Voss, and 3 months ago, I signed on to play the heroine in Serpent's Kiss, a massive adaptation of the best-selling novels that had been burning up the charts for 5 consecutive years. The series had sold 12 million copies worldwide. The fanbase was rabid. The expectations were astronomical. The studio had been trying to get this project off the ground for nearly a decade, cycling through directors and scripts and potential leads like a carousel that never stopped spinning. When my agent called to tell me I had won the role, I screamed so loudly my neighbor pounded on the wall. The studio announced the casting on a Monday morning in late September. I was the female lead. Caspian Ashford was the male lead. The press release went out at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, carefully crafted by a team of publicists who had spent weeks wordsmithing every sentence to minimize controversy. It didn't work. Within an hour, the internet had lost its collective mind. My fans were furious. They flooded every social media platform with outrage, their messages multiplying like bacteria in a petri dish. Lyra is a Golden Globe winner, they wrote. She trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. She's been nominated for an Olivier Award. Caspian is just a pretty face with a famous last name who got into acting because his grandfather built a studio. She's carrying this project on her back, and he's going to drag her down like an anchor made of nepotism. His fans were equally unhinged. They retaliated with their own barrage of attacks, each one more vicious than the last. Caspian Ashford is Hollywood royalty, they wrote. His grandfather founded Ashford Studios in 1947 and built it into an empire. His father produced 7 Best Picture nominees and won 3 Oscars. His mother was the most celebrated costume designer of the 80s. Lyra Voss is nobody. She clawed her way up from indie films and off-Broadway productions. She didn't attend a single industry event until she was 25. She thinks she can headline a blockbuster? Please. The studio had listed my name first in the announcement. The order was alphabetical. That was the only reason. But Caspian's fans noticed immediately and started flooding the comments with accusations of favoritism and demands for corrections. They claimed the studio was deliberately diminishing him. They claimed I had manipulated the publicity team. They claimed everything short of me personally stealing the letters from the keyboard and rearranging them myself. The word headline became a trending topic. Entertainment news shows devoted entire segments to the controversy. Pundits argued about the ethics of billing order. Former studio executives were interviewed for their opinions. It was exhausting, and it was absurd, and it showed no signs of stopping. My agent called me that afternoon, her voice tight with the particular strain of someone who had been arguing with studio executives for 4 consecutive hours. "We need to fix this," she said. "Fix what?" I was lying on my sofa, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. There were 14. The narrative, the public perception. Right now, everyone thinks you and Caspian are mortal enemies who can't stand to be in the same room together. The studio is worried it'll affect the film's opening weekend. They want you two to do a reality survival show together. It's called Into the Wild. 2-day shoot in the Rocky Mountains. You'll build a shelter together, cook together, look like you actually get along. It'll soften the tension before filming starts. I sat up. I don't actually get along with him. You don't need to. You just need to look like you do. It's called acting, Lyra. You're an actress. Act. I wanted to argue, but she had already moved on to discussing logistics. The helicopter would pick me up at dawn on Thursday. The production team had secured permits for a remote section of national forest. The survival expert would brief us before the cameras started rolling. There was no room for negotiation. The decision had been made before she even called me. What they didn't know, what no one knew except me and Caspian, was that we had history. Messy, embarrassing, impossible to explain history. 2 years earlier, I had been a background character on a period drama he was starring in. My role was small, a ghost that haunted the protagonist's memories, appearing in flashbacks and dream sequences. I wore heavy period costumes in the middle of a brutal Los Angeles summer. Corsets and petticoats and wool cloaks that weighed 15 pounds. By the end of each shooting day, I was drenched in sweat and desperate to escape. One afternoon, I needed to change out of my costume. Every single dressing room was occupied. The production was running behind schedule, and the costume department was frantically trying to get background actors out of their elaborate outfits so they could be cleaned and stored. I wandered the corridors of the soundstage, growing more frustrated with each locked door, until finally I pushed open a door without checking the nameplate. Caspian Ashford was standing in the middle of the room, half undressed. His shirt was off. His pants were halfway down his thighs. He was wearing nothing but black boxer briefs and an expression of absolute, undiluted horror. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. His eyes were wide. His mouth was open. His hands were frozen mid-motion, still clutching the waistband of his pants. I could see the muscles of his abdomen. I could see the line of his collarbone. I could see far, far more than I had ever wanted to see. I slammed the door so hard the hallway light flickered. Then I stood there, my back against the wall, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain the entire soundstage could hear it. I heard him moving inside the room. I heard him mutter something under his breath. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I fled to the restroom, changed into my street clothes in a stall, and left the set without speaking to anyone. After that, I avoided him at every industry event. I skipped the wrap party for that show entirely, claiming a family obligation. When we passed each other at awards ceremonies, I looked at the floor, the ceiling, the walls, anything but his face. At the Golden Globes the following year, we were seated 3 tables apart, and I spent the entire evening strategically positioning myself behind a floral arrangement the size of a small automobile. Now we were supposed to spend 48 hours alone in the wilderness, pretending to be a functional team, with cameras documenting every moment of our inevitable awkwardness. The helicopter dropped us on a ridge overlooking a vast pine forest. The Rocky Mountains stretched in every direction, their peaks dusted with early snow. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The air was cold and thin and smelled of pine needles and distant wood smoke. The cameras were already rolling. The production crew had set up remotely operated drones that hovered at a respectful distance, capturing wide shots of the landscape and close-ups of our faces. We were completely alone and completely exposed. The survival expert, a weathered man named Garrett with a gray beard and hands like leather, handed us a map, a compass, 2 water bottles, and a single tent. He delivered his instructions with the grim satisfaction of someone who had seen countless celebrities fail at basic outdoor tasks. "You'll need to share sleeping arrangements," he said, his face perfectly straight. "Body heat is the most effective way to prevent hypothermia. The temperature drops below freezing up here after dark. If you don't stay warm, you won't make it to morning." I wanted to push him off the ridge. I wanted to grab the tent bag and throw it into the nearest ravine. I wanted to explain that the last time I had been in close proximity to Caspian Ashford, I had seen him in his underwear and hadn't been able to look him in the eye for 2 full calendar years. Instead, I smiled for the cameras and said nothing. Caspian didn't look at me. He just picked up the tent bag, slung it over his shoulder, and started walking down the trail without a word. His posture was rigid. His stride was long and purposeful. He looked like a man marching toward his own execution. "Let's go," he said, his voice flat. No warmth, no acknowledgement, no indication that we had ever met before, let alone that I had seen him in a state of profound undress. I followed because I had no choice. The drones hummed overhead. The cameras captured every step. The survival expert watched us disappear into the trees with an expression that suggested he was already planning his commentary for the eventual blooper reel. The first hour was silent. We hiked downhill through dense pine forest, the needles muffling our footsteps. The trail was narrow and uneven, littered with exposed roots and loose stones. The air grew colder as we descended into the valley. The light filtering through the canopy was golden and dappled. It would have been beautiful if I hadn't been so acutely aware of the man walking 3 feet ahead of me, radiating tension like a space heater. We reached the river around midday. It was wider than I had expected, maybe 30 feet across, with water that churned white over submerged rocks. The bridge that was marked on our map, a rickety wooden structure that had been maintained by the Park Service for decades, had collapsed. Splintered beams jutted from the water like broken bones. Crossing here was impossible. We would have to wade. "I'll go first," Caspian said. He didn't wait for my response. He just stepped into the water, his boots sinking into the rocky riverbed, his jaw clenched against the cold. The water was freezing. I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his breath came faster, the way his movements became stiff and deliberate. He was halfway across when his foot slipped on a moss-covered stone. His arms windmilled, his head went under. The current grabbed him and pulled him downstream. I dropped my pack and ran into the water without thinking. The cold hit me like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs. The river was deeper than it looked, the current stronger. I fought my way toward him, my boots slipping on the same treacherous stones, my arms burning with the effort of pushing through the water. I grabbed his arm and hauled him up. He came up sputtering, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his blue eyes wide with shock. Water streamed down his face. His shirt was soaked through and clinging to his chest. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Saving you," I gasped. The cold was making it hard to breathe. My teeth were chattering. "I don't need saving." "Clearly, you do. You were drowning, in 3 feet of water." He glared at me. I slipped. "I didn't drown." "You went under. Your head went under. That's drowning." I was coming back up. "After how long?" He didn't answer. We stood in the freezing river, water rushing around our legs, glaring at each other while the drones hummed overhead and the cameras captured every moment of our mutual hatred. The comment section was exploding, though I wouldn't see the full extent of it until weeks later. Did she just run into a river for him? I thought they hated each other. This is the most dramatic thing I've ever seen. I'm calling it now. They're either going to kill each other or fall in love. There is no middle ground. We made it across the river. We found a flat clearing near a rock face and set up the tent. We gathered firewood. We cooked canned beans over a small fire. We didn't speak. The sun went down behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in the space of an hour. The wind picked up, rattling the tent fabric and sending sparks spiraling from the fire. The production crew had set up a remote camera near the tent and another near the fire. They were capturing everything: the way we avoided eye contact, the way we positioned ourselves on opposite sides of the clearing, the way the silence between us was louder than any conversation could have been. Finally, the crew signaled that the cameras were off for the night. The drones returned to their charging stations. The production team retreated to their base camp 2 miles away. We were alone. We sat on opposite sides of the tent, staring at the fabric walls. The wind howled outside. The fire crackled and popped. The silence stretched between us like a physical thing. "You didn't need to do that," Caspian said quietly. His voice was different without the cameras. Softer, more uncertain, almost vulnerable. "Do what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Jump in the river. You could have drowned. The current was strong enough to sweep you away." "So, could you?" "You did drown, briefly. I saw it happen." He was silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing in the dark, slow and steady. Then he said, "I thought you hated me." The words hung in the air between us. I could feel them settling into the cold fabric of the tent, into the thin nylon walls, into the space that separated our sleeping bags. "I don't hate you," I said. The admission felt strange in my mouth, like a word I had learned but never used. I don't hate you at all. I thought you did. After what happened. After you saw me, you know. I thought you were disgusted. I wasn't disgusted. I was mortified. There's a difference. What's the difference? Mortified means I wanted to disappear. Disgusted means I wanted you to disappear. I didn't want you to disappear. He almost laughed. It was a small sound, barely a breath, but it was there. You really slammed that door. I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. I'd never seen a coworker in his underwear before. I didn't have a protocol for that situation. Most people apologize. I was too embarrassed to apologize. I was too embarrassed to do anything, so I just avoided you for 2 years like a completely reasonable adult. Very reasonable, he said. Very mature. I could hear the smile in his voice. The tension in the tent was easing, the cold silence giving way to something warmer. Outside, the wind had died down. The fire had burned to embers. The stars were visible through the mesh window of the tent, scattered across the sky like spilled sugar. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Anything." "That day, in your dressing room, why didn't you lock the door?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I was distracted. I had just gotten off the phone with my father. He was in the hospital, heart surgery. It was minor, but he made it sound like he was dying. My father has always been dramatic." I didn't know. No one knew. I didn't tell anyone on set. I was trying to keep it together. I was trying to be professional. And then you walked in, and I was standing there half naked, and all I could think was that my father might be dying, and I was trapped in a dressing room with a woman who couldn't even look at me. I felt something twist in my chest. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault. You didn't know." Still, I should have apologized. I should have said something. Instead, I just ran away. "You came back," he said. "What?" "You came back. At the river. You jumped in after me. You didn't have to do that. The cameras would have understood if you stayed on the bank. But you jumped in anyway." "I didn't think about the cameras. I just saw you go under, and I moved." He turned to look at me. The tent was dark, but I could see the outline of his face, the curve of his jaw, the glint of his eyes reflecting the dying firelight. "That's what I mean," he said. "You didn't think. You just acted. You put yourself in danger for me without hesitation. No one has ever done that for me before." I didn't know what to say. The silence that followed was different from the ones before. It was comfortable. It was warm. It was the kind of silence that two people can share when they no longer feel the need to fill it with words. The next morning, we reached the extraction point 8 hours early. The production team was stunned. Garrett, the survival expert, actually smiled, which I gathered was a rare and momentous occasion. We had worked together, actually worked together, not just tolerated each other for the cameras. He had navigated using the compass and the map, his sense of direction far better than mine. I had foraged for edible plants, identifying wild onions and wood sorrel based on half-remembered lessons from a survival documentary I had watched years ago. He had built a signal fire that produced thick white smoke visible for miles. I had climbed a pine tree to scout the route, straddling a branch 30 feet above the ground while he stood below shouting unhelpful advice about the placement of my feet. When the helicopter arrived, we were sitting on a flat rock near the landing zone, sharing a water bottle and arguing about whether pine needles could be steeped into a drinkable tea. The argument had been going on for 20 minutes and showed no signs of resolution. "They can," I insisted. "Native Americans have been using pine needle tea for centuries. It's rich in vitamin C. It prevents scurvy." "They absolutely cannot," Caspian said. "Pine needles contain compounds that are toxic in large quantities. You'd be poisoning yourself." "Not all pine needles, only certain species, and the ones in this forest are safe." I checked. "You checked? When did you check?" "Before we left. I researched edible plants in the Rocky Mountain region. You researched edible plants for a reality show? I research everything. It's a character flaw. Garrett, the survival expert, who had been listening to our argument with a bemused expression, leaned toward the nearest camera and said, "Deadpan, pine needle tea is safe in moderation. They're both wrong and they're both right. This is the most entertaining thing I've seen in 30 years of doing this job." Caspian's face went red. I laughed. The helicopter landed, and we climbed aboard, still arguing. The show aired 3 weeks before filming was supposed to start. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The comments section was a river of disbelief and dawning realization. Did he just blush? He definitely blushed. Are they flirting? This is enemies to lovers in real time. I can't believe I'm watching this. They're literally arguing about pine needle tea, and I'm invested. She climbed a tree for him. She climbed a 30-foot tree. If that's not love, I don't know what is. By the time we arrived on set, the entire world had decided we were secretly in love. Tabloids ran speculative covers. Entertainment shows devoted segments to analyzing every frame of the survival show footage. Social media was flooded with fan edits set to romantic music. We were a phenomenon. We weren't in love. Not yet. But something had shifted between us in those 2 days in the wilderness. The awkwardness was gone. The avoidance was gone. In their place was something tentative and uncertain, something that felt like the beginning of a path neither of us had planned to walk. Filming Serpent's Kiss was the most demanding project I had ever worked on. The director, Elias Vance, no relation to me, though we had joked about it during my initial audition, was a perfectionist of the highest order. He had won 2 Academy Awards and been nominated for 5 more. He had a reputation for pushing actors to their absolute limits, for demanding takes that most directors would have accepted on the second or third attempt, for knowing exactly what he wanted and refusing to settle for anything less. He demanded 17 takes of every scene. He adjusted lighting between every shot, conferring with his cinematographer in hushed, intense conversations that could last 20 minutes or more. He rewrote dialogue on the spot, scribbling changes on the margins of the script with a red pen that he kept tucked behind his ear like a weapon. We worked 16-hour days. We ate meals standing up at the craft services table, too exhausted to sit. We slept in trailers parked next to the soundstage because going home would have wasted precious hours that could have been spent reviewing the next day's scenes. The film was a fantasy epic, dragons and ancient magic and a love story that spanned centuries. My character was a warrior priestess from a forgotten temple. Caspian's character was a fallen prince seeking redemption. The story required us to move from enemies to allies to lovers over the course of 3 acts, and Elias demanded that every beat of that transformation feel authentic. He would not accept shortcuts. He would not accept good enough. One morning, we were filming a scene where my character had just emerged from a mythical lake. The water was supposed to have healing properties, and the scene required me to be drenched and exhausted, my clothes clinging to my body, my hair streaming with enchanted water. Caspian's character was supposed to wrap me in his cloak and carry me to safety. We filmed it 12 times. The water in the tank was cold, not as cold as the river had been, but cold enough to make my teeth chatter after the 6th take. The cloak was heavy wool, lined with actual fur, and it weighed nearly 20 pounds when wet. By the 10th take, my arms were shaking from the effort of holding it around my shoulders. By the 12th, I couldn't feel my fingers. Between takes, Caspian pulled me aside. We were standing behind the lighting rig, out of sight of the main camera setup. His expression was tense, his jaw set. "You're freezing," he said. His voice was low, meant only for me. "I'm fine." The words came out automatically, the reflex of an actress who had been trained never to complain about conditions on set. "You're not fine." He took off his own jacket, a thick fleece that the costume department had given him between takes, and wrapped it around my shoulders. His hands lingered on my arms, rubbing gently to generate warmth. You're shaking. You can barely hold the cloak. You need a break. Elias won't give us a break. You know how he is. Then I'll talk to him. Caspian, don't. I'm fine. Really. 2 more takes and we'll have it. He looked at me for a long moment. His blue eyes were intense, searching. Then he nodded once and stepped back, but his expression didn't change. He was worried about me. I could see it plainly. The crew pretended not to notice the exchange, but I saw the makeup artist exchange a glance with the sound technician. Elias watched us from his director's chair, his expression unreadable. After the scene finally wrapped, on the 14th take, not the 17th, which was practically a miracle, he called me to his monitor. "You two have chemistry," he said quietly. His voice was matter-of-fact, the voice of a man who had spent 40 years observing human behavior through a camera lens. Real chemistry, not the manufactured kind that comes from good lighting and careful editing. I've seen manufactured chemistry 1,000 times. This is different. I didn't know what to say. I stood there, still wrapped in Caspian's fleece jacket, my hair still damp from the tank, and I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. "Don't waste it," Elias said. He turned back to his monitor, adjusting the contrast on the most recent take. Opportunities like this don't come often. When they do, you take them. I walked back to my trailer in a daze. I didn't take off the jacket until I was inside, and even then, I folded it carefully over the back of a chair instead of returning it to the costume department. The accident happened during the 3rd week of filming. We were shooting a combat sequence on a raised platform, a scene where my character and Caspian's were supposed to fight back-to-back against a horde of shadow creatures. The choreography had been rehearsed dozens of times. The safety team had inspected every cable and harness. Elias had personally walked the platform that morning, testing each joint and support beam with his own hands. But something went wrong. A support beam, weakened by a hairline fracture that no one had detected, cracked under the combined weight of the actors and the equipment. The platform tilted sharply. Equipment slid toward the edge. Crew members shouted warnings. I was standing near the edge, my back turned to the chaos, mid-swing with a prop sword that weighed nearly as much as my actual arm. Caspian grabbed me. He didn't call my name. He didn't shout a warning. He just moved, crossing the distance between us in 2 steps, wrapping his arms around my chest and pulling me backward with such force that we both went over the edge of the platform together. He twisted in the air, positioning himself beneath me, and hit the ground first. I landed on top of him, my head tucked against his chest, his arms still locked around me like a cage. The platform crashed down exactly where I had been standing. The sound was deafening, splintering wood and screeching metal and the shatter of equipment. Dust filled the air. Someone screamed. Someone else was calling for a medic. The safety team was already moving, their training kicking in automatically. Caspian was lying beneath me. His face was pale, his eyes wide, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He looked terrified, not for himself, but for me. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was rough, strained. "Are you hurt? Did anything hit you?" "I'm okay." I pushed myself up on my elbows, still straddling his chest. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I'm okay. You just—" "You're heavy," he said. I stared at him. I just survived a platform collapse and you're telling me I'm heavy? "You're welcome." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a hysterical laugh, the kind that comes when you've narrowly escaped death and your body doesn't know how else to respond. He was smiling up at me, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners, and despite everything, the dust, the chaos, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I felt safe. He didn't let go for a long time, even after the medics arrived and confirmed that neither of us was seriously injured. Even after the safety team completed their assessment and determined that the platform failure was a freak accident, not negligence. Even after Elias called off shooting for the rest of the day and sent everyone home, he stayed close to me, his hand always somewhere on my arm or my back or my shoulder, as if he needed to reassure himself that I was still there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in my head. The sound of the beam cracking, the feeling of being pulled backward, the weight of his body beneath mine, the look in his eyes when he asked if I was okay. I kept thinking about how fast he had moved, how he hadn't hesitated for even a fraction of a second. He had seen the danger, and he had acted, and his only thought had been to protect me. I walked to the catering tent around 2 in the morning, hoping that warm tea might settle my nerves. The tent was empty, the tables cleaned, and the coffee urns turned off for the night. But there was a light on in the corner, and Caspian was sitting alone at a plastic table, staring at a cold cup of coffee. He looked exhausted. He looked like he hadn't even tried to sleep. "You couldn't sleep either," I said. It wasn't a question. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair disheveled, his expression haunted. Every time I close my eyes, I see the platform falling. I see you standing there, right at the edge, and I can't reach you fast enough. I sat down across from him. The plastic chair creaked under my weight. "You saved my life, Caspian. You did reach me fast enough. You reached me faster than I thought was humanly possible." "You would have done the same." He said it with absolute certainty, as if it were an established fact. "I don't know if I would have been fast enough. I don't know if I would have seen the danger in time." He reached across the table and took my hand. His fingers were warm. His grip was firm. "I would do it again," he said quietly, without hesitation, without thinking, every time. "I know." I squeezed his hand. "I know you would." We sat like that for a long time. The coffee grew cold. The sky outside the tent began to lighten, the first hints of dawn creeping over the horizon. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The crew arrived the next morning to find us asleep at the catering table, our heads resting on our arms, our hands still intertwined. Someone took a photo. The photo leaked within hours. The tabloids had a field day. Secret romance on the set of Serpent's Kiss. Lyra and Caspian spotted holding hands after near-death experience. Sources say chemistry is definitely real. My publicist called me immediately. Her voice was tight with a mixture of professional concern and barely suppressed curiosity. "Is it real?" she asked. "The relationship? Are you actually together?" I looked at the photo on my phone. Our faces were soft in sleep. His fingers were still curled around mine. We looked peaceful. We looked like two people who had finally stopped fighting something neither of us could name. "I think so," I said. "I think it might be." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I love you, Lyra. I know you do. No, I need you to understand. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. And the thought of something happening to you, the thought of losing you, it's the worst thing I can imagine. It's worse than the platform collapsing. It's worse than the river. It's worse than anything." "Nothing happened to me," I said. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." He pulled me closer. His arms tightened around me. "Stay here," he said. "Stay with me. Always." "Always," I said. The award season came and went. Serpent's Kiss was nominated for 7 major awards. We won 4: Best Visual Effects, Best Original Score, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Costume Design. The film was a triumph by every metric that mattered. But the awards that mattered most to us were the ones we won for ourselves. Caspian won Best Actor at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. I won Best Actress at the Golden Globes. We stood on those stages, holding our trophies, looking at each other across crowded ballrooms, and we knew that something had changed forever. The night of the Academy Awards, we walked the red carpet together. The photographers shouted our names. The fans screamed from the bleachers. The lights were blinding. Caspian held my hand the entire time, his grip steady and reassuring. Inside the theater, we sat together in the front row. The ceremony was endless, categories and speeches and musical performances and montages. I lost track of time. I lost track of everything except the feeling of his hand in mine. Then they announced the category, Best Actor. The presenter opened the envelope. The pause was eternal. And the winner is Caspian Ashford for Serpent's Kiss. The audience erupted. He stood up, stunned. He turned to me, his blue eyes wide with disbelief. I pushed him toward the aisle. "Go," I said. "Go get your award." He walked to the stage in a daze. He accepted the trophy. It was gold and heavy, and he held it in both hands like it might disappear if he loosened his grip. He looked at the audience. He looked at the cameras. Then he looked at me. "I have one thing to say," he said. The room quieted. The cameras zoomed in on his face. "Lyra Voss, you are the most infuriating person I have ever met." Laughter rippled through the audience. I felt my face flush. "You argue with me about everything. You climbed a tree on national television just to prove you could. You jumped into a freezing river to save me when I didn't need saving, and you kissed me first." More laughter. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "But you are also the bravest person I know, the most talented actress I've ever worked with, and the love of my life." The audience erupted. He turned to me. "Lyra, I know this is public, and I know you hate public gestures, but I have one more question." "What?" I mouthed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. He got down on one knee, right there on the stage, with millions of people watching. "Will you marry me?" I covered my mouth with my hands. Tears were streaming down my face. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. "Yes, yes, yes." He stood up. He crossed the stage. He pulled me to my feet and kissed me, and the applause was deafening. The tabloids had their headline, the fans had their happy ending, and we had each other. We were married 6 months later. Small ceremony, in the mountains, near the ridge where we were dropped off for the survival show. The same river was nearby, the same trees, the same sky. We wrote our own vows. I went first. Caspian. 2 years ago, I slammed a door in your face because I was too embarrassed to apologize. 1 year ago, you pulled me off a collapsing platform and told me I was heavy. 6 months ago, you got down on one knee in front of the entire world and asked me to marry you. I promised to never slam another door between us. I promised to always catch you when you fall. And I promised to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me. His turn. Lyra. I spent years believing I didn't deserve love. I thought I was too difficult, too intense, too focused on my career. Then you walked into my trailer and told me I was overthinking a scene. Then you jumped into a river to save me when I didn't need saving. Then you kissed me first because I was too scared to kiss you. You showed me that love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose you. Today, tomorrow, every day after that, forever. We kissed. The river sparkled. The trees swayed. And we were finally, completely home. The end.